In the last two parts, we saw how to build the dashboard using React.js and the API using Node.js. To recall, we had built the React.js app for the dashboard. We also built the Node.js API that fetches the data from the Rapid API. However, we ran both locally but standalone. In this part, we are going to run both together and also upload them on Vercel. If you have missed the previous parts, I have added the links in the description. Do check them out. Now let's move forward. Now time to run the applications locally. First open the node.js API, locate the file. Inside this file add the values of API host and API key. Recall that we had seen these values back in part 2 of this series when we were exploring the Rapid API playground. Once replaced, your file should appear as shown on the screen. Of course, your values are going to be different than mine. Once done, run the command locally node index.js in the terminal. This will run the API locally. Now time to test out the API. Open the Postman software. If you do not have Postman installed, you can download and install for free. I have added the link in the description. Finally, send the request as shown on the screen. You should be able to see the output in Postman as shown on the screen. If you have seen the output as shown on the screen, you are ready to move next. We want to use the data that we are fetching from Rapid API to build our dashboard. For this, we want to run the API and the React.js app locally together. We have already run the API. Now let's run the front-end application. To do so, open the front-end application in your favorite IDE, in my case Visual Studio Code. Inside this folder, locate the file called .env and .env.development. Inside these files, update the URL of the API. We know that our API is listening for the requests on localhost and port 5000. Carefully add the value as shown on the screen. Now that we are done with replacement, run the command in the terminal on the root of your directory structure npm start. This should start the front-end dashboard application and it should fail as shown on the screen. What just happened? If we look at the network tab in the browser's console, we will see that the request has been blocked by the CORs. You can open the browser's console by right-clicking the browser and selecting Inspect option. Next, go to the console section as shown on the screen. It should be displaying the error as shown on the screen. This is the CORS error. So what is CORS? CORS is a browser security feature. The web browsers restrict the requests that are going to a different domain. If we see our application, we can see that the front end is at origin, HTTP localhost 3000, and you are making the request to the API at HTTP localhost 5000. Here we are sending the request from origin, which in our case is localhost 3000, to another destination, which in our case is localhost 5000, and hence the browser is going to block this request. To fix this issue, a common way is to add allowed origins in the header. Access control allow origin HTTP localhost 3000. In other words, the server at HTTP localhost 5000 is saying that I allow the requests from HTTP localhost 3000. This will make the browser happy and it will let the request pass through. With this knowledge, now we know that the fix of this issue needs to be done at API level. We know that the fix of the API is to add header at each request. Now we might have 100 plus requests in the API, so we cannot add our header addition code to every request. Here comes the concept of middleware. So the middleware does exactly what it is called. Every request that comes to the API goes through the middleware. So our one code will do the job for every incoming request regardless of the route. Now back to the code. Open your API code in the Visual Studio Code. Locate the index.js file. Inside this file, add the block of code shown on the screen. The code snippet is very simple. First, we specify which origins are allowed by specifying the access control allow origin. Now run the code. Congratulations, it is working now. Now that we have run our application locally, it's now the time to deploy the application on Vercel. This will allow us to share the application with anyone with the link. But first, let's see some words about Vercel. Vercel is a cloud platform for front-end developers that enables fast deployment and hosting of web applications, especially those built with frameworks like Next.js. It offers features like serverless functions, edge caching, and automatic CI/CD integration. Vercel is known for its seamless developer experience, performance optimization, and easy collaboration tools. To deploy on Vercel, you will need to have an account on Vercel. For that, visit vercel.com. I already have the account, so I will skip this part. To deploy on Vercel, it's better to have your code hosted on Git repository. Once we connect our GitHub repository, we will have our repositories displayed. Make sure your API and front-end dashboard. Now to deploy the applications. Let's start with dashboard app deployment. Select the Add New button. Create a new project in Vercel and select the repository where your code lives. Now remember there was a .env file and .env.development file. We have to create the environment variables in our application. Click the Setting button on the top tab bar. Now on the left-hand side, select the environment variables. Here we have two options. Either we can create new variable or import the .env file. Either of these can be used. Create the variable, and now we will need to replace the value here of the Node.js API that we are going to create next. To deploy API on Vercel, we need to do some changes in our API. This is because Vercel does not by default support Node.js API. To deploy API on Vercel, we need to do some changes in our API. This is because Vercel does not by default support Node.js API. Make sure your URLs are correct in both API and dashboard app. To help with debugging, there is an option of logs and observability to see what's happening in your Vercel apps. Now we are done. Open your front-end application and select the domains. Click it and you should see our Covid-19 dashboard using React.js and Node.js. Congratulations if you have made this far. Learning should never stop. So stay tuned for more interesting stuff using programming. If you want me to make a video on any app or idea, feel free to put it in the comments and I'll see you in the next one.